Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode. India is now one of the fastest growing economies in the world. In terms of GDP, India has recently overtaken the United Kingdom. However, India's unemployment rate is at a record high. India's trade deficit is at a record high, and so is a prolonged inflation in India. So, what is the actual reality of India's economy? To talk on this, we have with us today a very distinguished guest, Dr. Arvind Mayaram. Dr. Arvind Mayaram is the ex-Finance Secretary of India. He has been India's alternate governor in the board of the World Bank, and he has also been India's finance deputy in the G20. Last question. Environmental index, India ranks last. That is, it is at 181 out of 181 countries. It was at 168th position in 2020. Why do you think we rank the lowest, and what kind of economic policies can help us quickly build back our environmental deterioration? And it also shows a huge correlation between per capita income versus environmental index. So what are your thoughts? We can do something very quickly about it.
One fact is we are in whatever situation we are for the very fact which a conversation I used to have even in G20 finance deputies meetings and also in the World Bank board meetings and other places. The per capita energy consumption, for instance, in India is 16 times lower than per capita energy consumption in the United States. And almost 60% of Indians have inadequate or no supply of energy. So for us to be able to go and say we will be able to deal with the deterioration, that there'll be no burning of wood or burning of cow dung, etc. for cooking and so on, tomorrow morning is not possible. And then second part is that all the technologies that are called clean technologies emanate from advanced economies. The environmental standards are also set by them. So their technologies then have to be purchased by us. And there are huge IP costs of that. Intellectual property cost is very high. And therefore, what happens is my argument was, you're telling me that the poor person living in the village in India who has no electricity today should buy electricity at a cost which is higher on account of the fact that I'm buying for coal, for instance, because I mean, however much we may say, but solar energy or wind energy, the efficiency of that energy is much less. So if I need that kind of energy, only resource I have in India is coal, and you say coal is dirty, and we will not provide any assistance, and you should not have thermal power, and you should retire your thermal power, etc., transitions and so on and so forth. And then we are willing to give you loans. So I have a fiscal deficit issue. You're telling me take loans to become green. You're not willing to give grants. For 200 years, you have destroyed the environment by using as much coal as you wanted for your industrial revolution. You have come to a level, everybody is prosperous. Now you're telling me, go hungry so that our world can be clean. You have to pay a price for it. But imagine they have not put they are not putting enough resource to be able to do that. So the question is, for countries like India, I mean, I'm talking a macro question, is the world needs to wake up that if they want countries like India, I'm not just saying India because there are other developing countries in the same situation, countries like India to contribute significantly, then the bill that has to be paid for it must substantially be paid for those who should own responsibility for having taken us to where we are today.
They don't have an interest, perhaps, to really...
No, they have an interest. They have an interest. Because all the time, every conversation, if you listen to conversation even today, even the United Nations Secretary General, even when you're looking at talking about everything else, climate is on top of their head. So it is not as if in every conversation, every global policy, every World Bank lending policy is now driven by climate concern. So this is where it is a catch-22 here. You are making it a debt-driven effort to clean the world, but the debt-driven effort will not work because countries cannot anymore contract debts. So while we are continuing to do what we have to, because for instance, our solar energy program has expanded quite rapidly.
Yes, yes.
Our wind power has expanded quite rapidly. But those are not the only things that can help in cleaning up the environment. We'll need much more. For instance, one of the proposals I had raised in the G20 meeting of finance deputies was, let us say this, that all the new the technologies, clean technologies that we import, the element of price that can be attributed to intellectual property of that should be paid by you. We will pay for the technology, but don't charge us what is called the monopolistic price of the technology, because it's a state-of-the-art technology. Nobody has, there's no competing technology. You make it competitive to the other. The other thing I had suggested was have something called viability gap funding, which we have put in India for infrastructure projects, which means that if I was to do a green project, whatever is the difference in the price of that project, the cost of that project from what I would have done traditionally. If the price rises by 10% or 15%, let there be a global viability gap fund, which then gives me that 15%. So you see, there are ways of looking at it.
But it depends on the leaders of individual countries whether they would sanction it. I mean, it might, they may agree in a UN or in a World Bank, but finally it boils down to the elected leader of those countries whether they.
Let me come back to you to the 2008 crisis. What happened when the G20 met? After that, you remember they had put together a fund, a crisis fund of more than $500 billion. And India had pledged $10 billion to it. For what? To prevent European economies like Spain, Italy, and others, and Greece going into a meltdown, for providing special assistance to those countries. G20, actually the only time G20 was useful was that time when a concerted global policy was evolved to prevent a catastrophe. Let G20 take this lead, like they did take after 2008.
So can India put pressure on these countries?
We did. See, I'm telling, we did continuously.
At that time, can you do it for today for environment as well?
We will continue to do so, but you see, the point is that unless it becomes a life and death issue for the advanced economies, when they begin to see, now perhaps this winter they will see, when the gas, enough gas is not available for heating, when it starts hurting them, then perhaps they will begin to take that. There, when Europe was melting down, when Greece was about to collapse, Spain was about to collapse, Italy was about to collapse, it was a real danger to the European community. When they saw that real danger, they rose to that. But today, I think what our first Prime Minister had said in 1948 itself, and then later, of course, recently our Foreign Minister has said the same thing. But the Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, had said in 1948 that we understand that Europe has a problem. But it is time that Europe realized that problems of the Europe are not the problems of the world.
Hmm.
And they must begin to look outwardly and to see that the problems of the world have to be solved if the problems of Europe have to be solved. And I think we have come a long way, but nothing much has changed since then. Because when Mr. Jaishankar went and said the same thing, that your problems are not problems of the world. I mean, he was paraphrasing Nehru, but the fact is that what he was saying is true. They still believe that when West, the advanced economies are in trouble, the whole world should stand up to help them. But when others are in trouble, well, it's an individual problem. You should take care of your own issues, problems. So it's time that they begin to look at things differently. But if you really want, climate change or global environmental issues to be tackled, it has to be a global effort. India on its own cannot deal with its own problems also. I mean, because the issues are much bigger than what it can tackle on its own.